When people hear mind control, most imagine some crazy sci-fi stuff. Secret government experiments, swinging pocket watches, people falling into deep trances like robots. But honestly, real mind control in the real world, it's a lot more subtle, a lot quieter, and way more common than people think. In this book, Daniel Smith breaks it all down into 5 main types: brainwashing, hypnosis, manipulation, persuasion, and deception. Each of them works differently, but they all mess with your head one way or another. Let's walk through them. First, brainwashing. This one's heavy. Brainwashing is full identity takeover. The idea is to break someone down completely, emotionally, mentally, strip away who they are, and rebuild them into something new. It's not instant. It takes time, isolation, and some really nasty tactics. This is how cults pull people in, how prisoners of war get turned. Scary stuff. But we'll go into the full process of how brainwashing works in detail when we hit Chapter 2. And trust me, that chapter is wild. Next, hypnosis. Forget the pocket watches and people barking like dogs on stage. Real hypnosis is much calmer than that. It's basically a state where your mind becomes hyper-focused, super relaxed, and wide open to suggestion. You're not unconscious. You know what's happening, but you're more likely to accept ideas being fed to you. It's often used for good things like therapy, quitting bad habits, pain control, but of course, when used unethically, it can tip into mind control territory. We'll dive much deeper into hypnosis later in Chapter 3. Third, manipulation. Honestly, this one happens to all of us, probably more than we realize. Manipulation is when someone twists your emotions, plays mind games, or deceives you to get what they want. It could be guilt, tripping you, making you feel small, lying to you just enough to confuse you. Often it comes from people you trust, friends, partners, co-workers. Manipulation doesn't need fancy equipment. It just needs someone willing to cross boundaries. We'll explore manipulation more deeply when we get to Chapter 4. Then there's persuasion. Persuasion is everywhere. It's not always bad. Every time someone tries to convince you to buy something, vote for someone, or support an idea, that's persuasion. Politicians, salespeople, influencers, they live off this stuff. It can be honest, using logic and facts, but it can also easily turn sneaky, using emotions or pressure. We'll break down the art of persuasion in Chapter 5. And finally, deception. This one is simple but dangerous. Deception is lying, hiding the truth, giving you only parts of the full story. What makes it so powerful is that you usually don't even know you're being lied to until it's too late. Relationships, business, politics, deception can cause serious damage. We'll talk more about deception and how it plays into mind control when we reach Chapter 6. So yeah, mind control isn't always loud and flashy. Most of it, super sneaky, and it's happening around you every single day, whether you see it or not. The more you understand how these techniques work, the better chance you have at recognizing them and not falling for them. Now in Chapter 2, we're going to go deep into brainwashing, exactly how someone's identity can be completely torn down and rebuilt from scratch. That part is seriously eye-opening. Chapter 2. Brainwashing. All right, let's get real for a second. Brainwashing is one of those things that sounds like pure movie fiction. You know, some evil mastermind captures someone, tortures them for a few hours, and boom, they're brainwashed. But in reality, real brainwashing is way more complicated, way more brutal, and honestly, way more terrifying. So what is brainwashing? At its core, brainwashing is thought reform. It's about breaking down who you are, your beliefs, your identity, your sense of right and wrong, and replacing it with something completely new. And the scariest part? The person being brainwashed often thinks they're the one making the choice. That's why it works. Now, brainwashing isn't something that happens casually. You're not going to get brainwashed by chatting with some random stranger on the street. For brainwashing to work, a few things have to be set up first, and they're nasty. First step, total isolation. The target needs to be cut off from everything familiar. No friends, no family, no outside opinions, no social media, nothing. Why? Because when you're isolated, your brain starts to depend on whoever is around. In this case, the brainwasher. Without outside input, you become way more vulnerable to suggestion. This is why brainwashing is mostly seen in extreme places: cults, prison camps, abusive relationships. Normal daily life makes brainwashing really hard because we have too many influences keeping us balanced. Then comes the breakdown. Once you're isolated, the brainwasher attacks your identity. You're wrong. Everything you believe is wrong. You are bad. They attack everything about you: your values, your beliefs, your self-worth, and they do it constantly. You start to question who you are. Over time, guilt starts to build up. You feel like you've done something terribly wrong, even if you haven't. The brainwasher amplifies this guilt, pointing out every little flaw or mistake you've ever made, making you feel worse and worse. And then comes self-betrayal. At some point, you start admitting things that aren't even true, just to make the pressure stop. You confess. You give in. You might even turn on your own friends, family, or community, denouncing the people who share your old beliefs. And that betrayal, it makes you feel even more ashamed. That shame locks you in even deeper. Next, the breaking point. This is where most people completely snap, emotionally wrecked, totally confused, full an identity crisis. Who am I? What do I believe? What's even real anymore? At this point, you're so lost that the brainwasher can offer you something you're desperate for: relief, the offer of salvation. Now that your old identity is shattered, the brainwasher comes in like a savior. Hey, you can feel better. You can be good again. You just have to accept this new way of thinking. They offer small kindnesses, maybe food, a warm conversation, a break from abuse, just enough to make you feel grateful. And when you're drowning in guilt and shame, even tiny kindness feels huge. You start to trust them. You start to crave that feeling of safety. And the only way to keep feeling safe is to accept the new beliefs they're feeding you. Confession and guilt. Rechanneling. You're encouraged to confess your sins, not actual crimes, but things that conflict with the new belief system. You start to see your old beliefs as the reason for your suffering. I was wrong because I used to believe that. Now I believe this, and I feel better. You've linked your pain to your old self, and now you see salvation in the new identity being offered. Finally, the rebuilding. Now comes the final stage, building a new version of you. The brainwasher feeds you new beliefs, new values, a new identity. And because you're desperate for peace, you accept it fully. They stop the abuse, give you comfort, and present the new way of thinking as your choice. But let's be honest, at this point you're so broken down, it's not really a choice anymore. In many cases, they'll even have some ritual or ceremony to welcome you into your new self, like you're being reborn. You feel accepted, safe, and at peace, as long as you stay loyal to the new beliefs. Real-life examples. The book gives two famous real-life cases that tried to use brainwashing as a legal defense. Patty Hearst, kidnapped by a radical group, locked in a closet, starved, and bombarded with propaganda until she started supporting her captors and even committed crimes with them. Lee Boyd Malvo, a teenager groomed and manipulated by an older man into becoming a sniper, committing multiple murders. In both cases, brainwashing was brought up as a defense in court. But here's the thing: brainwashing is very hard to prove. Judges and juries don't like accepting it as an excuse because it's tricky to know where brainwashing ends and personal responsibility begins. The tactics. Used brainwashing doesn't always need physical torture. Some of the tactics used include love bombing, fake family-like affection, peer pressure, confusing doctrines, overloading your brain with weird logic, no privacy, never left alone to think, chanting, strict dress codes, verbal abuse, sleep deprivation, financial commitments, making you invest money to stay loyal, guilt, fear, shifting blame, and so on. It's a long, exhausting process, and once someone goes through it, they honestly believe that their new beliefs are 100% their own choice. And this is why brainwashing is so terrifying. It's not about forcing you to do something, it's about breaking you down so deeply that you willingly accept whatever they give you, thinking you came to that decision on your own. Now, in Chapter 3, we'll go into hypnosis, a completely different kind of mind control. Less brutal, but still surprisingly powerful when used right. Chapter 3, Hypnosis. So we've talked about brainwashing, which is honestly brutal stuff, but now we're shifting gears into something a little less intense but still pretty fascinating, hypnosis. When people hear the word hypnosis, most of them picture some stage magician waving a pocket watch in front of your face, counting down from 10, and suddenly you're clucking like a chicken in front of a laughing crowd. But real hypnosis? It's actually nothing like that. It's not magic. It's not mind control like the movies make it seem. It's much more about focus, suggestion, and your brain's natural ability to zone in. So what is hypnosis? At its core, hypnosis is simply a state of focused attention. You're not asleep, you're not unconscious, you're fully awake, but your brain becomes laser-focused on one thing, and because of that, you're much more open to suggestions. Think of it like this. You know those moments when you're driving on autopilot? You get home and realize you barely remember the whole drive because your mind was wandering? That's kind of like a light form of hypnosis. You're awake, but you're not fully analyzing every little thing around you. Your brain slips into a relaxed, highly focused mode. That's the sweet spot where hypnosis lives. Two ways people explain hypnosis. In the book, Daniel Smith explains that experts usually fall into two camps when it comes to what hypnosis actually is. The altered state theory. Some believe hypnosis creates a special state of consciousness, like a trance. Your brain waves slow down, and you enter a slightly different mental mode where suggestions sink in deeper than normal. The non-state theory. Others argue there's no special trance happening at all. They say hypnosis is really just role-playing. You're awake, fully in control, but you're following along because you expect to. You believe it will work, so your brain kind of allows it to work. How hypnosis works the process. No matter which theory you believe, the steps are pretty much the same. Induction. This is where the hypnotist helps you relax and focus. It might involve counting, deep breathing, soft music, or calming suggestions. The goal is to quiet down your busy mind. Suggestion. Once you're in that calm state, the hypnotist starts feeding you ideas or instructions. It could be as simple as, you will feel more confident every time you speak. Or it could be more therapeutic, like, you will no longer crave cigarettes. Susceptibility. Not everyone responds to hypnosis the same way. Some people go deep really fast. Others stay on the surface. About 10 to 15% of people are considered highly hypnotizable. These are the folks you see doing wild stuff on stage. But most people, they're somewhere in the middle. What hypnosis can and can't do. Here's where people get it twisted. Hypnosis is not some magic trick that lets people control your every move. You don't lose your free will. If a hypnotist suggested you rob a bank or jump off a building, you wouldn't just obey, unless deep down you already wanted to do those things, which is a whole other issue. But hypnosis can be super helpful for certain things. Pain management. Hypnosis has been used to help people deal with chronic pain. Anxiety and stress helps people calm down, sleep better, and reduce anxiety. Bad habits, like quitting smoking or overcoming phobias. Memory retrieval, though this one is controversial because sometimes it creates false memories too. So is hypnosis mind control? Not really, at least not in the way people usually mean when they say mind control. Hypnosis works because you allow it to work. You're still in charge, but you're open to suggestions. If you resist, it doesn't work. If you expect it to work and you trust the process, your brain kind of cooperates. That's why unethical hypnosis, like secretly hypnotizing someone to get them to do things they don't want to do, is extremely rare and extremely hard to pull off. For the most part, hypnosis requires your permission. The big takeaway: hypnosis isn't some creepy superpower. It's really just a tool. Like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. Used ethically, it can help people change habits, deal with stress, and improve their lives. Used unethically, well, it can definitely become part of a larger manipulation game. But by itself, it's not nearly as scary as brainwashing. Now, in Chapter 4, we're going to step into manipulation. And this is where things start to get really sneaky. This is the kind of mind control that happens all around us, every single day, sometimes without us even noticing. Chapter 4. Manipulation. All right, let's sit with this one for a bit. Manipulation. This is the one people deal with every single day, at home, at work, online, everywhere. You don't have to be in some crazy cult or dark back alley to experience mind control. Manipulation is happening constantly, and most people don't even see it until they're already tangled up in it. Let's be brutally honest here. We've all manipulated people at some point. It might have been small, like convincing your friend to go eat where you wanted, or playing a little guilt card on your parents to get something. But there's a huge difference between harmless persuasion and full-on toxic manipulation. The scary kind of manipulation. That's when someone consistently uses emotional pressure, lies, and mind games to control others, sometimes for years, and they're often really good at making it look like you're the one who's wrong. How manipulation creeps in. The thing about manipulation is, it usually doesn't start out big. It starts tiny. A little guilt trip here, a small lie there, a bit of blame shifting. And over time, you start adjusting your behavior, just a little, to avoid conflict or keep them happy. At first, it feels easier to just give in. You think, hey, it's not a big deal. I'll let this one slide. But manipulators are playing a long game. Every small win gives them more control. The more you adjust, the more they learn how to push your buttons. Until one day, you look around and realize you've been slowly trained into behaving exactly how they want. Let's break down the dirty tricks in more detail. Guilt tripping, the master weapon. Manipulators love guilt. It's their favorite tool because it makes you feel like you're being selfish for setting boundaries. After everything I've done for you, I guess I'm just a terrible person then. I thought you cared about me. They flip the script so you feel like you owe them, even when you've done nothing wrong. And it works, because good people naturally don't want to hurt others. You want to make things right, so you give in. And they get exactly what they wanted. Playing the victim, the pity card. This one's powerful because humans are naturally empathetic. When someone acts hurt or broken, your first instinct is to comfort them. Everyone always abandons me. I'm always the one getting blamed. I guess I'm just not good enough for anyone. It creates this imbalance where you feel responsible for their happiness. You start carrying their emotional weight. And before you know it, you're constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid hurting them, even when their pain is completely self-created. Gaslighting, the mind bender. Gaslighting is one of the most dangerous manipulation tactics. This is when someone flat out denies your reality, making you question your own memory, your own feelings, your own sanity. You say, "You yelled at me yesterday." They respond, "What? That never happened. You're being dramatic." The more this happens, the more you start doubting yourself. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I imagined it. And that's exactly what they want, to control your perception of reality. Long-term gaslighting can completely destroy a person's confidence and self-trust. You stop believing your own thoughts. Shifting blame, the deflector shield. This is the art of never taking responsibility. No matter what happens, somehow, it's your fault. If you hadn't acted that way, I wouldn't have done what I did. You always push me to the edge. It keeps you constantly apologizing, even when you did nothing wrong. Over time, you internalize the blame. You start thinking, if I could just act better, maybe they wouldn't treat me this way. Passive-aggressive silence, the emotional freeze. Instead of communicating openly, they withdraw affection, attention, or conversation as punishment. They give you cold silence, moody distance, making you feel anxious and desperate to fix things. You start scrambling. What did I do wrong? How can I make it better? And they stay quiet, knowing you'll bend yourself into knots to restore the peace. Fake generosity, the debt trap. Some manipulators will do favors, buy gifts, or go out of their way for you. Not out of kindness, but to create invisible debt. After everything I've done for you, you can't even do this one thing. You feel obligated. You feel like you owe them something. They're cashing in on that guilt anytime they want. Emotional blackmail, the nuclear button. This is full-on toxic control. If you leave me, I'll hurt myself. If you don't do what I want, I'll expose your secrets. They use your deepest fears against you, trapping you emotionally. This is one of the most abusive forms of manipulation, the long-term damage. Here's what prolonged manipulation does to people. You lose trust in your own judgment. You constantly feel anxious and guilty. You start thinking you're the problem. You develop people-pleasing habits just to avoid conflict. Your self-esteem slowly dies. Some people stay trapped in these cycles for years, sometimes entire lifetimes, believing they're the bad one, when in reality, they're being controlled. Why do manipulators do it? Because manipulation works. It's easier than honest communication. Instead of risking hearing no or dealing with uncomfortable conversations, manipulators twist situations until they get what they want without ever looking like the bad guy. Some manipulators are fully aware of what they're doing. Others grow up learning these habits from toxic families or relationships, and they genuinely don't know any other way to get their needs met. Either way, it's not healthy. Real-world examples of manipulation. Toxic relationships. One partner constantly guilts the other into staying, threatening to hurt themselves if they leave. Abusive parents. Making children feel like they'll never succeed without their approval. Workplace bullies. Supervisors who subtly threaten your job security unless you bend over backwards. Religious leaders or cults, creating shame and fear to keep people obedient. Social media influencers, playing victim to manipulate followers for money or loyalty. It's literally everywhere. How to defend yourself against manipulation. All right, so what can you do? First, and this is key, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Once you recognize manipulation, half the battle is already won. Set clear boundaries. Stick to your principles, even if someone tries to make you feel guilty for it. Don't engage emotionally. The more you react emotionally, the easier you are to control. Get outside perspective. Talk to people you trust. Outsiders can often see manipulation much more clearly. Stay calm under pressure. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactions. Don't give them the fuel. And sometimes, the only option is walking away, especially if the manipulator refuses to change. Bottom line, manipulation is one of the most common and most damaging forms of mind control out there. The scariest part isn't how loud or aggressive it is. It's how quiet it can be. It slips in, one guilt trip at a time, one little lie at a time, until you're living in a world designed by someone else, and you don't even know it happened. And now, in Chapter 5, we'll move into persuasion, which is kind of like manipulation's nicer cousin. This one's used everywhere, in marketing, politics, sales, even friendships, but with a much more open, transparent approach, at least when done ethically. Chapter 5. Persuasion. All right, now that we've dealt with the heavy stuff like brainwashing and manipulation, let's talk about persuasion. And this one's honestly way more common than most people realize. You see, persuasion is everywhere. It's not some rare psychological trick. It's in your conversations, in your daily choices, your social media feeds, every ad you scroll past, every product you buy, every vote you cast. The big difference here, and this is important, is that persuasion isn't always bad. In fact, a lot of persuasion is completely normal, and honestly, it's part of how human beings function. We live in a world where we're constantly influencing each other. The problem comes when people use persuasion dishonestly. That's when it can quietly start sliding into manipulation territory. What makes persuasion so powerful? The thing about persuasion is, you're aware it's happening. Unlike manipulation, where someone tries to secretly control you, persuasion is up front. You know they're trying to convince you. But here's the kicker. Even when we know we're being persuaded, it still works. And sometimes we don't even notice how strong its pull really is. Let's take it down to basics. What is persuasion? At its core, persuasion is just this. One person influencing another person's beliefs, attitudes, or actions, usually through communication. And that can take so many forms. Logical arguments, emotional appeals, subtle social pressure, even simple repetition over time. Sometimes you're fully engaged in the decision-making process. Other times, you're on autopilot and barely aware you're being nudged. Systematic vs. heuristic persuasion, the two main routes. Daniel Smith explains that persuasion usually happens through one of two main routes: systematic persuasion, the thinking brain path. This is when someone lays out a clear argument. They give you facts, data, pros and cons, logical reasons for why you should choose something. For example, let's say you're buying a car. The salesperson gives you fuel efficiency numbers, safety ratings, maintenance costs, warranty details. You sit there, weigh the options, and make your decision based on the information presented. Systematic persuasion works best when you care deeply about making the right choice. You have time to think. The stakes feel high. You want to make a smart decision. Heuristic persuasion, the feeling brain path. This one is way more common in daily life. Instead of detailed facts, heuristic persuasion relies on mental shortcuts, little rules of thumb your brain uses to save energy. For example, if everyone else likes it, it must be good. If it's expensive, it must be high quality. If a celebrity uses it, it must work. You're not sitting there calculating every little detail. Your brain just goes, yeah, that makes sense. Let's go with that. This works especially well when you're tired, you're in a hurry, you're distracted, you don't care enough to analyze everything. Now let's break down the actual persuasion weapons, the stuff you see all the time. Reciprocity, the you owe me effect. Humans are wired to give back when someone gives to us first. You know how stores give you free samples. That's not because they're being generous. It's because they know you'll feel a little guilty walking away without buying something. Same thing when someone does you a small favor. You naturally feel pressure to return the favor, even if they don't ask. This is why free trials, free gifts, free consultations work so well. Even in friendships or relationships, reciprocity pops up. I did this for you, so now you kinda owe me. Commitment and consistency. The I already started trap. Once you commit to something publicly, you feel a strong pressure to stay consistent with that choice, even if you're having doubts. For example, you tell people you're going vegan. Now, you feel uncomfortable ordering steak in front of your friends. You post online about starting a fitness challenge. Now you feel more motivated to follow through, because people are watching. Marketers love this too. Start your free trial today. Once you start, you feel locked in. Social proof. The everyone's doing it trigger. When we're unsure what to do, we often look at what other people are doing and follow along. Ever see something like bestseller? Over 5 million sold worldwide. Everyone's wearing these shoes. You instantly feel safer choosing it, because if millions of people trust it, you assume it must be good. Social proof works especially well when you're in unfamiliar situations. You don't want to feel left out. The crowd feels like a safety signal. Liking. The like me, trust me rule. We're more easily persuaded by people we like. Simple as that. Attractive people seem more trustworthy. Friendly salespeople close more deals. Celebrities sell products by association. This is why influencer marketing works so well. I like this person. If they recommend it, it must be good. Even things like shared interests, humor, or flattery increase likability, and therefore persuasion. Authority, the expert says so, shortcut. When someone appears to be an expert, we tend to trust them almost automatically. Doctors in white coats, financial advisors in suits, famous authors or scientists, even symbols of authority, like titles, awards, certifications, give people extra persuasive power. And most people rarely question authority figures, which is why this tactic works so smoothly. Scarcity, the better get it now. Panic. When something feels rare or limited, its perceived value skyrockets. Only 2 seats left. Limited edition? Once it's gone, it's gone. Flash sale ending tonight. You start thinking, if I don't grab this now, I might miss out. Scarcity triggers our survival instincts. We hate losing potential opportunities, even if we weren't originally that interested. Where does persuasion show up? Pretty much everywhere you turn. Advertisements, social media, product packaging, political speeches, fundraising campaigns, negotiations, friendships, and dating. Once you know these techniques, you'll start seeing them being used every single day. Is persuasion always bad? Absolutely not. Persuasion is a neutral tool. It depends entirely on how it's used. A teacher persuading students to study harder? Good. A doctor persuading a patient to stop smoking? Good. A scammer persuading you to send them money? Not good. The danger comes when people use these techniques while hiding their true intentions. That's when persuasion slowly turns into manipulation. How do you protect yourself? It comes down to awareness. When you feel pulled toward a decision, stop and ask yourself, am I being rushed? Am I buying this because I really need it, or because of scarcity pressure? Do I actually trust this expert? Am I making this choice because it logically makes sense, or because everyone else is doing it? Slow down. Create space to think. The more conscious you are, the harder it becomes for anyone to persuade you in ways you don't want. And now, in Chapter 6, we get to deception, the ultimate underlying force behind all of this. Because no matter how good persuasion or manipulation might be, none of it works if people can't control what you know. Once they start controlling your information, that's where true mind control really begins. Chapter 6. Deception. So far, we've talked about brainwashing, hypnosis, manipulation, and persuasion. But now, we get to the real core of mind control: deception. See, no matter how skilled someone is at persuasion or manipulation, it all kind of falls apart if people have access to the full truth. That's why deception is so dangerous, because once you control what people know, you can control everything else they think, believe, and do. What exactly is deception? It's simple. Deception is lying. But not just flat-out lies. Deception comes in many flavors: telling only half the truth, twisting facts, leaving out important details, distracting you from the real issue, presenting information in a way that misleads. Sometimes the scariest kind of deception is when the person isn't technically lying. They're just carefully choosing what not to tell you. Why is deception so powerful? Because people rely on information to make decisions. If you control the information, you control the decisions. Imagine this. Let's say I'm selling you a car. I tell you, it runs great, low mileage, one previous owner, no accidents. Sounds good, right? But I conveniently forget to mention that the engine needs a $3,000 repair. I never technically lied, but I still deceived you. You bought the car thinking you had all the facts, but you didn't. That's how deception works. It creates an illusion of truth while hiding the ugly parts. The problem with deception: you often don't know it's happening until it's too late. That's what makes deception so dangerous. With manipulation, you might start to feel something's wrong. With persuasion, you know someone's trying to convince you. But with deception, you don't even realize you're missing key pieces of the puzzle. You're making decisions based on what you think is the full story. Let's break down some types of deception you see in the real world. Outright lies. This one's obvious, flat out telling you something that's not true. I never said that, when they absolutely did. I've never cheated on you, when they have. Your money is safe with me, when it's not. Half-truths. This is sneakier, telling you something true, but leaving out crucial details. Our product has a 98% satisfaction rate, but only among people who didn't request a refund. I've never been arrested, but leaving out multiple lawsuits or shady activities. Misdirection. Distracting you by focusing your attention somewhere else. A politician caught in scandal might suddenly talk loudly about a new charity they're supporting. A cheating partner starts accusing you of being jealous or controlling to shift the focus away from their behavior. Denial and minimization, downplaying the seriousness of the situation. It was just a small mistake. Everyone does it sometimes. You're overreacting. This makes you feel like you're the one being unreasonable for even bringing it up. False promises, offering something that sounds good but is never actually delivered. I promise I'll change. This investment is guaranteed to make you rich. Next year, things will be different. They say exactly what you want to hear, just to keep you locked in. Silence, the most underrated form of deception. Sometimes, the most powerful lie is saying nothing at all. Not telling your partner about your secret debt. Not warning your customers about known product flaws. Not mentioning side effects of a medication. Silence leaves people to assume everything's fine, and that assumption gives you control. Why do people deceive? Honestly, because deception is efficient. It's easier to lie than to face conflict. It's easier to hide mistakes than to admit failure. It's easier to keep people happy with fake promises than to risk losing them with the full truth. And here's the ugly truth. Most people deceive because it works, at least in the short term. The long-term cost of deception. Deception always comes with a price. Broken trust. Once people catch you lying, it's almost impossible to rebuild their trust fully. Even small lies can permanently damage relationships. Paranoia. Chronic liars start living in fear, afraid of getting caught, always juggling more lies to cover old ones. Emotional damage. The person being deceived can feel deeply betrayed, humiliated, and angry once the truth comes out. In toxic relationships or cult-like environments, long-term deception can completely destroy a person's ability to trust anyone, including themselves. Real-life examples of deception. Romantic relationships. Cheating while pretending to be loyal. Hiding entire parts of your life from your partner. Business scandals. Big companies hiding financial losses, defective products, or unethical practices. Politics leaders twisting statistics, leaving out context, or outright lying to gain public support. Scams. Fraudsters convincing victims to invest, donate, or share private information using half-truths and false promises. How do you defend yourself against deception? This is tough because you're trying to spot what you don't know. But there are a few habits that help. Ask good questions. Don't just accept surface answers. Push for details. Verify information independently. Check facts. Get second opinions. Don't rely on just one source. Watch for patterns. If someone keeps minimizing problems, shifting blame, or changing their story, that's a red flag. Listen to your gut. Sometimes your intuition picks up on inconsistencies even before your brain does. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who value honesty. The best defense against deception is being in environments where full honesty is the norm, not the exception. Bottom line, at the end of the day, deception is the quiet weapon that makes all the other forms of mind control even more effective. Because if someone can control what you know, they can influence what you believe. And once they control your beliefs, they control your choices, your behavior, your entire reality. That's why deception is at the heart of almost every form of mind control, from personal relationships to massive global systems. And that wraps up our full breakdown of banned mind control techniques unleashed. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's simple. The more you understand how people can influence your mind through persuasion, manipulation, hypnosis, brainwashing, or deception, the stronger you become at protecting yourself from it. Awareness is power. And now, you've got that power. All right, so now you've seen the full breakdown of how mind control actually works. And honestly, it's not as dramatic as movies make it look, but that's what makes it so dangerous. The truth is, most mind control is quiet. It shows up in subtle ways, through guilt-tripping, persuasion, emotional pressure, half-truths, or people controlling what information you even have access to. But now that you understand how these techniques work, you're no longer blind to them. Awareness is the first step toward protecting yourself. The more you recognize when someone is trying to manipulate or deceive you, the less control they have over your mind. So whether it's in your relationships, your work, your daily conversations, or even the media you consume, stay sharp. And if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe for more content like this. Stay aware, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.